Hello friends and welcome back to Let's Play Fez. I'm your host Noam Chomsky and this is the second part of the mini-series within Let's Play Fez of how I broke my arm. And I already talked about how I broke my arm. This is going to be more about my experience going to the emergency room and all that kind of stuff. And pretty much the effects of various drugs that were pumped into me during the whole, you know, experience. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyways, where we left off, I was in the emergency medical center at the ski resort, and so they put a little really crappy paper splint on my arm and stabilized it with some like gauze or something. I don't really know what it was. But needless to say, it was a very uncomfortable experience. One, because my arm was broken, and two, because, well, you know, cardboard doesn't feel too well on a bone that is just sticking sideways out of your arm. It's not sticking out of the skin, but you know. So yeah, they told me that we had to go to the emergency room to get my bone set back into place. And just so you guys know, I had broken my wrist in two places, the two bones I mean. My left and my right bone, I don't know what they're called. It's like the ulna and the radiate or something like that. And on top of that, my wrist had been dislocated, like my hand had been dislocated from the bone. So yeah, all kinds of bad, gross looking stuff. And so yeah, I had to go to the emergency room, and the insurance that I am currently under is Kaiser. So the nearest Kaiser Permanente was an hour away in Fontana. And so I had to sit very uncomfortably. I was still wearing the snowboard boots the entire experience. It was really funny because I showed up to the emergency room clunking about in these snowboard boots, and you know, all of the medical people that were there were like, oh, you know, just another guy coming back from Mountain High with a messed up wrist. And I'm like, yeah, of course, that's me. But yeah, so the whole hour drive back was really painful. And when I got there, there were just a bunch of sick, sad, in pain people, and I was just depressed because I was also sick and sad and in pain. And I hate going to medical areas just because there are needles and blood and sadness and agony, and yeah, it was just very sad. So I got there and they finally admitted me, put me on a nice little bed, they took off my boots, and one of the most painful parts of this entire story was when they took off my shirt. I had 3 layers. One was a very, very tight thermal, one was a normal shirt, and then one was a jacket. They were able to get the shirt and the jacket off pretty easily, but the thermal, like, they were so close to just cutting it off because it was, you know, they had to get it, it was a long sleeve thermal, and they had to get it off of my arm, you know, through the twisted bone without really touching it, because that would hurt, like, insanely. So yeah, they did that, and then they put an IV in my other arm, and this was my first experience with IVs, and they just filled me up with morphine, which was nice, I guess. If you guys haven't had an IV, what it feels like is, you know, of course there's just a needle in your arm all the time, which is rather uncomfortable, but besides that, when they actually like inject the drugs into the IV, you feel a weird sensation of coldness coursing through your veins wherever like the IV started, and it's just because the morphine is colder than your blood, so you just get cold, and then it courses up, and like maybe 5 seconds later it goes to your head. And I think what the doctor says is you're supposed to feel a lightheadedness. I didn't really get that. I felt like heavy-headed. Like, it wasn't a headache, but I just sort of, my head felt heavy. And then just steadily and eventually the pain subsided in my arm, and that was when the morphine kicked in, so I was happy. And yeah. So morphine was the first of 3 drugs that I was led to take because of the breaking of my wrist. And the second that they put me on was propofol, and that was another IV injected serum. Well, actually, I think what morphine does is it causes nausea, so they gave me something else. I don't remember what it was called because, you know, they all have weird names, and so yeah, there was something else besides morphine. But anyways, propofol. This was to sort of put me under so that they could reset my arm in its proper position. And it wasn't supposed to completely knock me out, just sort of make me, like, drowsy and not in pain, I guess? I don't know. It might have knocked out other people, but it didn't knock me out. So I was awake during the entire resetting of my arm. And This was the weirdest part. I thought it was going to be some sort of weird medical procedure when they reset my arm, but it was seriously just them grabbing each end of my arm and wiggling it around so that they could just get it right back in the right place and then just putting it back together. They had to pull my arm apart first so that they could get, you know, some leeway in the bones and then put them back. And when I looked at the x-rays later, it turned out that they had slightly misset my right bone, so it's a little hinged off to the right, and that's dangerous because if that starts falling off or moving any more than it's already set to, my entire hand could be out of place, and that could lead to permanent damage. So you got to really be careful with my arm. But anyways, the propofol, right? So they injected my IV with propofol, and then they put a little oxygen mask on me to make sure that I was breathing and, you know, receiving oxygen. And then that's when they injected the local anesthetic to numb my hand down, and that was the most painful part of the entire experience. Not breaking my arm, not moving my shirt or taking it off. It was just injecting the local anesthesia, because they literally they grabbed a big old needle, shoved it right where my wrist was broken, and I guess they had to get it in the area where the bone bleeds. Inside the bone there's bone marrow and like blood cells, and those, you know, leak, I guess is the word to say. And yeah, they stuck the needle in right there, right where the bone bled, and then they just pushed it, and that was so painful. And I never want to break any bone again just because of that one part of the operation. But so yeah, they did that, and then very soon after I just didn't feel my arm, and then I started feeling really drowsy and sleepy. And so just eventually I didn't really fall asleep. Imagine staying up till 5 o'clock a.m. That's what it felt like. I was just really tired, sort of in and out of consciousness, but I was still awake. Like, I think intermittently it might have been 5 minutes. It's hard to keep time when you're knocked out like that, but around every 5 minutes the doctor's like, "Are you still with us, Guillermo?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm here." And then, you know, they just kept going. They kept just wiggling my arm. And so yeah, finally they finished. They slapped a splint on, which is what I'm still wearing right now. And then yeah, I was just sleepy the rest of the day. I was sleepy and marginally uncomfortable, I guess. I don't know. And so yeah, the third drug that they gave me was Vicodin, and that was the pill that you take afterwards, you know, to make sure that you're not in too much pain to not carry out the day. And that's pretty good stuff. It just sort of numbs out the pain. It still hurts, but it makes it less painful. And then besides that, it just makes you really sleepy. So yeah, I was just sleepy all day, and that's the summation of my experience with breaking my wrist. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. I can do a follow-up episode of questions about broken wrists and whatnot. Overall, it's not too much to fear. It's just sort of there. I don't know. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please give me a like. And until next time, this is your host, Noam Chomsky, signing off.